Hi, this is K.N.Fitzwater and you're watching my channel. So it's been a long time since I've done a video. Way back, I'm gonna say March, since I did a video. I did not intend for it to go this long. A lot had happened in my life that required my attention. A lot of people have passed away. My work had been very busy, and what little time I had from taking care of my family members and myself and taking care of the real life work, I had only been working on this. So I didn't have a lot of time to do social media. It's not just YouTube that had floundered. I had been lacking in taking care of Instagram, Twitter, and all the other departments of the internet concerning my platform. So you're not alone in not seeing me for a while. I apologize. It's just very difficult to get back on the horse when it starts galloping away from you and you don't have the energy. So now I'm on it. I'm back in the swing of things. Let's go ahead and get started. Throughout this whole summer and fall, I have been working on this. This is the Doppelganger Queen's big editing book. This is something Gwenda had suggested in one of her editing lectures, that I should print this out and make notes. And notes I did. I had sticky notes and red markings galore throughout this whole thing. It's a lot worse in the back because I realized I have to do a lot more working and streamlining. Oh, here's a nice one here. So just a lot of notes I have to do on this puppy. It took me all summer to go through it with a red ink paper and some sticky notes and just figure out what could I do to make it better. I received some information from the lead agents that I was close but not close enough. And what they meant by that was to just polish it. Do another draft or two on this piece of work. Work on your POV, work on pretty much everything. Just make it up to snuff. What I thought was going to be suitable for going to the editing house, they said that it needs to be a higher bar. So I'm going through another revision, and it's been going pretty smooth. I am almost there in translating the notes onto my laptop. And after that, it's going to be some nitty-gritty sentence by sentence, grammar, punctuation, style, etc. editing. The good old line editing that everyone hates except the line editors themselves. So that being said, I have been working on that throughout the summer and fall, on top of going to writer conferences, writing classes, the whole shebang. What writers do when they actually have money and resources to do stuff. And along the way, I have been asking, what is the best opening you could do for your book? These are the stuff that I have learned from these classes and conferences that I'm going to dispense back to you. Now, if you are a self-publishing writer, you are just going to put your book on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles, and you thought there's no way I'm going to deal with a traditional section whatsoever, I really hope this is going to help you too. In the digital age, without the preview of other pages in your book, the very first thing the audience is going to see is your first page, and that can make or break your book. They don't have the luxury of taking it off the shelf, look at the pretty cover, look at the back spiel, and then opening up in the middle or any random section and then decide whether they like it or not. You don't have to captivate them with the first. In the digital world, you do. You captivate them with the very first sentence. So I hope this is going to help you as well. Help you get ahead of the crowd. Because apparently the mistakes that the agents are seeing are very common and what everyone has been doing. And I hope that this will help you get ahead of the game. That being said, let's jump into the... actually, let's go to the positive route. What do agents want? And that will help explain why we have some of the don'ts that we don't have. Agents want to know who the character is, why they should give a damn about the character and their situation, and they want to be grounded in the location and the space that the character is in. They want to know the time frame. Okay. Sorry, it's winter and it gets cold, and that turned on. They want to know the character's situation in a clear manner, and they want to know where they are. And they want to care or connect with the character in some way. We don't have to have a humongous backstory or exposition about the character. We don't need a super car crash, extravaganza, action, explosion beginning. You just need something that makes the people care about these people. The best example I could think of is okay, let's use George R.R. Martin, since I'm a fantasy writer and you're probably one too, or a fiction writer. Let's go ahead and throw George R.R. Martin here. He poured a George Lucas where he had non-main characters open up the beginning. And he talked about this ranger who wore all black. Black cloak, black everything, and they're out in this white pristine snow landscape. And you thought, okay, why is he wearing all black? Why are they out here? And we get that it's a medieval based system, probably fantasy. We don't know anything magical yet. But why are they out here? What's going on? What's going to happen? What they're going to find out. So as you learn between the banter between these two characters, you kind of get more information as they are delving into this winter landscape. So that's what agents want, or at least those in the fantasy world. Another great beginning that you could do will be Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, where he began, it's a bit of exposition, but he had a very good voice. We'll talk about voice a little bit later. Where he was able to open up intriguing sentences. A hole in the ground, there lives a hobbit. The question is, what is a hobbit? He goes in, and instead of explaining what the hobbit is, he explains about the hole. And by explaining about the hole, where it's not full of ooze and worms, it's a hobbit home, and that means comfort. Talks about the comforts of the hole. The movie shortened it. In the book, it's a nice, cute little paragraph about the hobbit home. So through this, you get a sense of the hobbits as a race, as a group of people. And through this particular home, he was able to go into Bilbo Baggins. So you don't have to have an action scene. You don't have to have a very crazy type of flashbang beginning. What agents want, or most audiences, is something intriguing, something that's going to pique their interest, and you're going to hold their hand and guide them through into your book until something magical, scary, wonderful happens to this character. So here are some don'ts. We're going to jump into some don'ts, and we're going to go more of the proper do's. The don'ts that they are tired of is the bait and switch method. The bait and switch method they're tired of seeing is the dream sequences or the long, extensive exposition that may not pertain to the character. This kind of plays into the prologue scenario, which is something that you have to be careful of. The bait and switch is just dumping all this information, you're pitching it to the reader, and you're telling them everything. There's no secrets, everything's all up front, and then suddenly the character wakes up, or we finally get to this character. But it takes forever. And you thought this is nothing but the book. You thought that the dream sequence is about this great magical heroine, and then we cut to this, high school girl. And we thought, okay, we're going to have to reconnect to this new character, because we already connected to this magical hero in this dream sequence. Now we're stuck with this teenager in high school going through normal life, dealing with normal shenanigans. And we thought, when are we going to have her get to this level? So that's the type of bait and switch they're not going to like. They don't like dream sequences simply because of this fact. They also don't like a lot of exposition because you're not intriguing them, you're telling them everything. You're not keeping any secrets, you're not leaving breadcrumbs for them to follow. You are pushing them over the cliff and they're falling into the story. Okay, and it's not pleasant. They don't care for that. They don't need to know about the extreme extravagance of the city, etc. Especially if it's a well-known historical site like late 1800s London and we have a detective. You don't have to go into a lot of expositionary detail about that. Everyone knows London, everyone knows it's foggy, everyone knows detectives. What makes you special? And that's what they want to know. What makes it special in this situation? So, no bait and switch if you can help it. If you are going to use characters that are not the main characters, just like George Lucas, or just like George R. Martin, make sure you're able to showcase the world through these characters, and it's about a situation that is going to haunt or involve the characters in some way or some form. What happened to George R. R. Martin's beginning affected the rest of the characters in the future seasons, and it's been hinted at and nagged at throughout in the very beginning. And that very character in that scenario is affected by the main character of the book. It does lead into it. So you can use them as a way to guide the reader into the main characters if you so wish. Another common one in detective stories where the murder victim is on the autopsy table where our main character is dealing with them. They have no clue what's going on, and they're about to find out the moment they took off that gown, or that cloth, sorry. So you could showcase the murder victim or the monster so long it is going to affect the characters later on in the story, and it is something that it's a focal point that you could direct into the main character if you're going to go by that route. Let's see. Another thing that most agents and some audience members don't care for is not the excessive amount of details, but the lack of details. They don't like any sort of confusing scenes if they could help it. No head hopping if necessary. You want to stay in the moment of the scene. You don't want to make anything confusing. You don't want to deviate off the path. And you want to give enough details of the situation and enough details about the character. They don't want any sort of confusion, heady themes. They don't want any sort of hallucination, because it's going to be confusing to them. They're going to think, I thought this is fantasy, but it turns out this person is in a drug-induced state, and I can't figure out what genre this book is. And they're telling me it's X, and I'm not seeing it. You don't want to do a trippy dream. You don't want to do a dream that's also confusing and nausea-inducing. You don't want a nebulous kind of beginning where it's just very amorphous and abstract. It's not something that's going to help them figure out what's going on. If you want to do that, that's going to be something later in your book. It can be done in Act 1. I've done it. But that's going to be several pages later. Not even 20 pages, like 50 pages or more. It's going to be much further in your book where you could do something like that. You already won the trust of the reader by then to involve something very heavy and very confusing and very nausea-inducing, where you have an unreliable narrator. Instead, if you want to describe something that kind of beginning, you may want to step back a little bit and showcase how this character is trying to get those drugs before he goes into that inducement. Why is he getting those drugs? What is he running away from? Etc. What caused them in this situation for them to grab it? And what are the type of people or place he's dealing with? So you want to step back and kind of move the camera back if you're dealing with that situation. Otherwise, you may have to cut that out completely or just relocate it and move it elsewhere. Another type of confusion that they do not care for is extreme violence. Part of that is taste. Part of it is because they don't like the confusion, like a post-car accident or post-bombshell going off kind of confusion. They want to know who these characters are in a sense where we're going to care about them. That type of violence right off the bat is going to give them a headache. They don't know where they are, they're not grounded, and they want to care because violence is awful to begin with. But if you're not giving something that they're going to latch onto, they're going to be turned away. You're not going to help them. So it's best to, once again, scale it back to where they were before this thing happens. I suggest having this happen as an inciting incident. Not in the very beginning, but in the middle or close to the middle of the first act, where you're able to showcase what the life is like. Then this happened. And then you could talk about how they were preparing to change or have been changed by this incident. The inciting incident doesn't have to happen in the beginning. You can do it in the middle, or you can do it a little bit later in the first act. Now, the third thing, I'm not really keeping track, but I think this is the third section of goofs that they do not care for. other than giving a whole lot of details or no details, is just boring them. They don't want to be bored. They want to have something that's going to pique their interest. And you don't want to have a wake-up routine where they get out of bed, they get their shit together, and they go. They want something that makes it interesting. Don't make it normal if you can help it. Do something that's very intriguing. They see the wake-up sequences more often in YA contemporaries. It's best if you do the opening in a social situation that they normally are part of, and it reveals a sense of the character who they are. For instance, they always go to the beach in this summer. Every single year they go to the beach. This is something that's normal for the character. But for some reason, this particular summer is special. So you get to talk about or showcase why that is a very special summer for them. Maybe a lot of things are going on in the summer because they're entering their senior year, and they're going to leave for a normal life or a college life, and this is their last high school year, their last summer as a teenager. Next year they're going to go to the beach as an adult. You know, this is a big transitional moment. What does it mean to be an adult and leaving your teenage years behind? You know, stuff like that. If this is your last teenage summer, what are you going to do? Those are kind of the don'ts that the agents said they don't care for. They've seen 1,000 plus material almost every day, or 100 plus material every day, probably 1,000 on a weekly basis, and they have to make a snap judgment before they read on to the next. And if they see something where it's just the same thing over and over, they're just not going to take it. They're not going to like it. So why do we authors do this to ourselves? You know, why do we create these type of openings? Let's go back to the first one, the high detail exposition phase. We go through that because we want to get all of our notes out of ourselves and write it down on paper. It's kind of a regurgitation, and we felt like we don't have enough time to display this throughout the book. It's kind of like a vomit, if you will. It's very nervous, and it's something that we just regurgitate. We felt that no one is going to accept the book if we do it a normal guide the hand type of way. It's a sign of nervousness that we do, and it's best that we take that and paste it in a different Word document and call it notes. And just leave it alone. Just put it there, and you know it exists. You already have it. You wrote it. It exists. It's there. The readers are not going to read it because it's going to stay in your computer. But now you're left without a beginning, and that's okay. You have a new start. You already have the notes that you have about what's going to happen in the book. Finding a more intriguing part of your story. If you have an expositionary dream that led to a wake-up scenario, then cut to where things start begin to become interesting in your book. After the wake-up scenario, after the dream sequence, and just start from there. Why do we have the heady confusion type of thing? Why do we have the nebulous phase in the beginning? I'm a pantser. I write from the seat of my pants. I get it. You're trying to come up with a story that will excite you and intrigues you. And you're creating a prompt for yourself. You're trying to figure out what it is. You created a scenario that gets your mind flowing. It gets your juices boiling. So you created this type of scenario, and because it intrigues you, it makes you want to figure out what's going on, you continue on that story from that point. For us writers, we're able to deal with the abstract and nebulous parts of ourselves, and that is fascinating for us. We're a little bit more mental in that way. What we need to do is use that later in our books and go to the earlier part of the story. Let's backtrack a little bit and what led to that confusion state. Whether it's a drug induction, whether it's a violent situation, whether it is a traumatic moment, something that is a very confusing, scary moment, or a nebulous state. Let's backtrack to what led to that moment and go from there. If it's something that you're not able to backtrack, see if you're able to cut that out and see if that affected the story at all. Did that affect the narrative? Is it something that was absolutely necessary? Can it survive on its own without it? If it can't, try to find a way where you can ground the reader in that section, in that beginning. So it's not confusing to read, but they understand the character of that situation is confused and anxious, and they probably regret being in that situation. And last but not least, the wake up morning type of routine. The kind of, this is the normal way of life for the character. We took it too literally. We look at our lives and we're like, I wake up, I brush my teeth, I head to the typewriter, and I start writing, and that's my life. It's best if we think about what is a normal situation that they always do throughout their life that's not routine. And something that's going to change for the character as they go on. School, every year at school is always going to be different because you're dealing with new people that are being transferred over. Some people have left. You receive new studies, new teachers, new activities, maybe a new location. Something historical happened in the nation that's affecting them, etc. So, if you're going to do the YA route, we wrote the getting up and go routine because we compare ourselves to that routine. We took the mundane literally and tried to throw it on the page. People understand and are not going to relate to the character with mundane. They're going to relate to the character if they do something that they aren't able to do themselves but they wish they could. That's one way to help an audience relate to the character. A good example is Despicable Me. We are able to see in short beats that this character is despicable, but we love him because he was able to do the things that we wish we could do. For instance, the long coffee line, and you're wanting to have your coffee. He just pulls out his freeze ray and frees everyone in the line and took someone else's coffee order, drank it, and left. And he didn't have to wait in line at all. It's wrong, but at the same time, it's right for the character, and we're able to learn more about them. And it happens rather quickly. Then again, it happens rather quickly because this is a cartoon and it's a movie. So these opening moments are going to be rather quick. We're able to see how he was able to drive his car, how he goes to work or to his house, what the work environment looks like. His case of normal is different from everyone else's normal. This is what we want to see, the abnormal. If you felt a little bit overwhelmed relying on a film reference, I suggest looking at Harry Potter's book. Harry Potter's book. The J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter book. His normal is a little bit abnormal because he's dealing with some really awful people. It did begin with a wizard dropping the baby at the doorstep with a wizard who was able to transform a cat to a normal person. There are some intriguing magical things happening in that beginning. But if you have a reader that typically skips the prologue, you're going to have to reopen the book again with their chapter 1. And that's the boy in the cupboard type of lifestyle. His normal was someone banging at his cupboard telling him to wake up. And it's not exactly a normal routine day because it's Dudley's birthday. It's not Harry's birthday, it's Dudley's birthday. And something magical happens once Harry becomes 11 years old. Things were starting to occur. If you are going to use a prologue, be sure that it is a prologue with either the main character or characters that's going to lead into the main character's situation. Kind of like the R2-D2 and C3PO kind of character that's going to help guide the audience to the main character who's going to do the action of the rest of the book. The prologue should not be confusing. The prologue should not be a bait and switch. It should not doesn't have to be action filled. It's going to have the same treatment as chapter 1. And if you are going to do the prologue, you're going to do double time. Not only you're going to treat the prologue as chapter 1, you're going to make sure you are reopening again with chapter 1. Just in case there are readers that are not going to read the prologue and just jump straight into the chapter 1. Because there are some people who would do that. I was that way when I was a kid for the longest time, and I stopped doing that when I was in college. Simply because I felt that I was missing some information. And why I was doing that, when I was growing up, in the early 90s, they like doing the whole middle of the action, what's going to happen next to our heroes type of thing in the prologue. And then they move on to the actual main part of the story. And I didn't care for that when I was little, and I just keep hopping to chapter 1. So for me, when I picked up Harry Potter, I didn't really like the beginning, per se, with a wizard with a light switch. I just kind of went, yeah, whatever, and just hopped straight to chapter 1 and just go from there. Eventually, as I reread the books, I start looking back at the wizard taking off the lights and realize, oh, McGonagall was a cat, etc. That kind of thing. So people were making prologues a lot better than they were when I was growing up. So I think I spoke enough about openings, what lit agents or most people don't like and what they do expect. I think the main key takeaway is intrigue. Keep them interested. Give them enough detail to ground them in the space, and then leave some breadcrumbs. Give them something that they could follow, and hold their hand and carry them into the story. Don't push them off the cliff. Don't do this bait and switch. Don't bore them, for the love of God. But you don't have to have a huge action sequence, and you don't have to have a huge info dump. You just gonna have to win them with your charm and with the characters that are in a situation, and you're gonna have to showcase how they care about these characters. Oh, and consistency. Be consistent. Don't head hop. Don't talk about the economy of the place, etc. You know, don't go off track with what's going on. If you could help it, just focus on the situation, focus on the moment, especially if you're a character-driven writer and you have a character-driven story. Stay in the moment and then showcase about the character and what's going on from there. Okay, so that's it. I hope this helps, whether you're a traditional or non-traditional writer. I hope this gives you a reevaluation on your stories and have a better opening and something that's going to pique interest of readers around the world, and I hope I see you next time. I'm not going to make any promises. My current work state is a bit random, which is to be expected in most places nowadays. So all I can say is that I hope I see you next time in a video in the next year, and yeah, keep writing, and I see you next time. Bye.